It's on Lyme disease and tick-borne diseases. So that should be very interesting. The doctor from Sojourns in Westminster is going to be talking about it. Betsy, she is a registered respiratory therapist, and along with a colleague, Ian, whose last name I can't remember.
Ian Jackson? Is that?
Anyway, they sort of came up with this way of doing this, right? Breathing out. And this is her new book, Just Breathe Out. And there will be copies for sale, and we have a library copy if you want to check it out. And so here's that.
Well, thank you all for coming. It's my mission in life to share the power of the out-breath. It has made all the difference in my life in the past 30 years, and it's a well-kept secret. And my job is to give it to the people. And that's why I come to libraries and community centers and mental health centers, because that's who wants the information. The people want the information. So thank you for coming. I am going to be sharing how I got into this, but I'm wondering if anyone's here because they want to learn more about having more energy, or maybe how to manage pain without drugs or toxic substances. Maybe you want to run a marathon, or maybe you just need to know how to get out of bed a little bit easier in the morning. So all those things are possible through breathing, and it's revolutionary breathing. And I have RRT after my name. It stands for Registered Respiratory Therapist, but I changed the first R to revolutionary, because I am changing the definition of breathing. Now, and I'm not the first one to do this. This whole system that is called the Breathe Out Dynamic System really takes a piece of yoga that says you get strength from your out-breath. And it's a whole book about why the out-breath is so effective and how to use it in daily life. And people say, well, is this a meditation? Well, for instance, I use it when I walk, when I hike, when I ski. It's moving meditation, but you could make vacuuming the floor meditative by focusing on your breath as you do it. So it's really 21st century concept of how to use breath in daily life to manage stress and pain and conquer addiction. And how can it do all these things? Well, it's because breathing is connected to every organ in your body. It affects everything. So how you breathe is very important. So the name of the talk is 3 Secrets About Breathing to Enhance Your Life. And yes, they're secrets, and we're going to expose those secrets, and it will help me to run you through why the Breathe Out Dynamic System is so powerful and could make a difference in your life. Let me just get something here. So before we get into the 3 secrets, is it okay if I tell you a story about how I came to... Oh, sure. Excellent. I'm glad you moved. How I came to be firmly convinced that the Breathe Out Dynamic System is of value. I'm a respiratory therapist. I've been an elementary school teacher, a licensed wilderness guide, a lot of different iterations of me. It was through my work in the outdoors that I met a woman who taught us a little Tai Chi and a little bit of yoga to get up mountains without huffing and puffing. And this was in the 1980s. Her name was Ann Mavromatis. I dedicate the book to her. She died of breast cancer in 1987, and in her process of dying, she asked me to carry on her work teaching breathing. How do you say no? You don't. I couldn't. So I took her challenge, and I started teaching workshops designed the way she designed them. And I realized that the work she was doing could really help people with asthma and emphysema. And I started talking to doctors, and I had no medical alphabet after my name. I was a wilderness guide and an elementary school teacher. So I really had no credibility. So I talked to a number of people, and they suggested I go back to school and suggested a degree in respiratory therapy. Because, I mean, respiratory, it sounds kind of like breathing, you know, like these people are breathing experts. So I did go to my local community college. I got a degree in respiratory therapy in 1992. And just as I was ending that period of study, I realized that, oh, respiratory therapists don't teach breathing. They might say don't forget to breathe or take a deep breath, but they don't teach breathing. And also I was very confused because of my understanding of, my understanding going into school about anatomy and physiology of the lungs was totally different than the way it was written in the book, because I was going by the out-breath as being the powerful part of the breathing cycle and the active part of the breathing cycle. And all the books were designed with in-breath as active. And so the whole muscle system is different when you focus on in-breath. So I had to change my way of thinking in order to get out of the box called college, which I did. And then I assigned myself a 2-year internship in a hospital. I said, if you're going to call yourself a respiratory therapist, you need to have the experience of a respiratory therapist in an ICU. So I imposed this internship on myself, not knowing what I might learn, but I knew I would learn some things. And my patients taught me so much. One day I was in the ICU, this woman was intubated, so she had a tube in her throat connected to a ventilator and all the monitors on the wall telling her blood pressures. There, there are many blood pressures and heart rate and breathing rate and oxygen saturation and so forth. And she was breathing a mile a minute. You could hear the ventilator, it was just chugging away way faster than it should. And I thought, I'm a new respiratory therapist. This is a really critical person. How can I help her? And I thought to myself, well, there's got to be something you can do. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if I can teach her the breathe-out dynamic system. I'm going to see if I can have her interface with this machine, because when you're connected to a machine, you're actually part of a whole circuit. And a lot of people think of it as the machine over here and the person over here. But no, you're connected, so you're all part of it. You're influencing each other. So I asked this woman, who of course couldn't speak, but she could blink her eyes, if she had a good imagination and if she'd like to play along with me. And she agreed, and I asked her to pretend that she was blowing up a balloon. And she started to pretend she was blowing up a balloon. And that ventilator that was making this racket all of a sudden started to settle down to about 15 breaths a minute. I looked at the monitors, her blood pressure moderated, her saturation came up. Everything improved just from this imaginary out-breath that she was doing. And I was, I was amazed. And I told the medical director, a pulmonologist, and he looked at me like I was crazy, and explained why it wasn't possible. And that was about the time my 2 years were up. And I said, you know what, I think it's time to move on, which I did. But in the meantime, I taught a couple of other people. One was a person who was trached. And I thought, well, let me see, if someone who's trached, whose airway starts here, could purse their lips and pretend to be blowing on a pinwheel. That's why you have your pinwheel. This doesn't work unless you blow on it. Your body works best when you're blowing out, and I'll demonstrate to you why that's so. And so I said the same thing to him. I want you to pretend, whatever it was, blowing on a balloon or blowing on a pinwheel. And the same thing happened. His respiratory rate moderated, everything got better. And then I got known as the person who could kind of take care of the hard cases. So I had this guy on a ventilator, been on it for 3 months, had an old ex-smoker, hopefully he was an ex-smoker, with COPD, and had been on a vent for 3 months. And he was scared that when they extubated him, he would not know how to breathe. This is a real problem. So for, I can't remember how long, but a week or 2 weeks, I would stand at the end of his bed when I was on duty, and we would practice our out-breath. And very shortly, he was extubated successfully. And so this is what I learned from my stint as a ICU respiratory therapist. And that was, I left that job in '94. And ever since then, I've been out in the community, either doing pulmonary rehab or doing home care as a respiratory therapist with folks with neuromuscular respiratory issues like ALS, people whose breathing is compromised. And even though it wasn't part of the protocol to teach these people breathing, my job at the clinic was to assess their breathing with various tests. I couldn't not share my knowledge with them. And I had about 5 minutes maximum to teach this. So I would say to them, and anyone who came with them, this is your imaginary pinwheel. I want you to blow on it comfortably until you can't blow comfortably anymore. Just pause briefly and then get right back to blowing out. And I would watch them do this. And what I learned from them was that when they blew out, their belly went in. Now, I didn't tell them to do that. Their belly went in, and when they paused, their belly came out. And it worked every time. I just say, blow on your imaginary pinwheel. Their belly would go in, and it would come out for the in-breath. This is the way the body is designed to work. Our culture has turned it around so that we're sucking in air. In-breath is active. Out-breath is passive. This whole program, a breathe-out dynamic system, is just the opposite. That's why it's revolutionary. We're changing the definition of breathing to active out-breath, passive in-breath. And it can be learned. Muscles are smart. But they need practice. Just like, playing the piano. Yeah, it just takes practice. You wouldn't expect to be able to do it the first time you sit down. So we're changing muscle habits, basically belly muscle habits. And we'll get into that. Okay, so 3 secrets. Okay, we're going to start with the third one. We're not going to talk much about the in-breath. It's passive. You do not want to waste energy on the in-breath, and we will demonstrate why that's so in a little bit. Okay, number 2. Trust the universe. Yeah, trust the universe. And it's called, actually, a little bit more detail. Breathe out dynamic system. Or BODS for short. So I didn't invent the breathe-out dynamic system. I changed the name, but it was the concept based on this yoga notion that you get strength from your out-breath was created by a guy named Ian Jackson. He died in 2011. He was my mentor. I met him through my friend Anne, who passed this whole thing on to me. Ian was an eclectic guy. He He was a surfer, he was a dancer, he was an Ironman triathlete, he was an Olympic cycling coach. He developed the breathe-out dynamic system over a period of years with cyclists, and he actually did research with cyclists, Olympic athletes. And what he discovered was that the cyclists, he did a study with 25 cyclists in Ohio, that half of them learned the breathe-out dynamic system and half of them did not. And 3 weeks later, he measured them again. The cyclists who learned the breathe-out dynamic system were able to pedal 2 minutes longer to exhaustion than those who didn't know. And when you're a racer, 2 minutes is a huge advantage. He also did some research with them because they were getting injured a lot, and they were getting injured on their what seemed to be their strong side. And so he measured calf muscles, and what he discovered was that most of these cyclists had one calf that was larger than the other by a half inch or so, an inch even. And that larger side was where they were getting injured. After they started using the breathe-out dynamic system for a period of time, he measured their legs again, and they had evened up, and the injuries declined. Because when you use the breathe-out dynamic system, the in-breath is a very small portion of your cycling time, and most of your time is spent on the out-breath. And also, he had a way of organizing breathing so that you weren't walking to or cycling to a 4/4 time, marching time. And that's all in the book. And that's a skill, an aspect of the breathe-out dynamic system that's a little bit advanced. But these were things that proved to me that this breathing system was worthy of attention. So, what does this mean, trust the universe? What is this?
Bellows.
And how does it work?
Pump it.
You pump it. But we trust that it works, right? It works to fan the fire. What's the principle? What's the guiding principle for this?
Sucks in the air in that hole and blows it out the front.
Okay. How is it that it comes back in?
Because you're creating a negative pressure.
Okay. So this is a container. We agree it's a container that holds air? Okay. Whenever you squeeze a container and suddenly expand it, you create a vacuum, which then causes suction. That's the way the universe works. You know, if you have a tube of shampoo and you squeeze out too much, right? You know, you squeeze the tube a little and you put it there and it sucks it back up. It works. We know that. This always works. We trust it. We don't even think about it because this is how the universe works. How does this work? What is this? Yeah, or a syringe, right? It's basically a giant syringe. So you squeeze it, push the air out, put it in the gravy, and up it goes. And you can always depend on it, right? It's dependable. Yeah, you trust that it works. How about your body? Is your body a container? Sure. You have bladder, you have bowel, that's a container, you have lungs, that's a container. You have all these containers inside your body. So is it logical to think that if you compress your belly or your bellows and then suddenly let it expand, that you might create a vacuum? Yeah, it's true. It works every time. So belly and the words belly and bellows are similar for good reason. they function the same way. Now, in our culture, we don't talk much about belly. It's a very sensitive area for a lot of reasons. How many of us work on their abs every day? Yeah. Developing strong belly muscles is one of the most health-giving activities you can do. And you can do it with the breathe-out dynamic system because it asks you to start using your gut. How do you start doing that? You know, I can wiggle my belly. A lot of people can't do that. It's like, you know, you can wiggle your finger. You should be able to wiggle or tense and relax every muscle in your body. Okay, how do you get started with belly? Well, what I suggest is you place your hands on your belly and you press gently as you blow on your imaginary pinwheel. And you're not trying, excuse me, you're not trying to blow out all the air. You're trying to blow out just enough. Depends on what you're doing. If you're just sitting, you could blow out a long time, most likely. But if you're walking, if you're going up a hill, it's going to be different. So you get to decide, how long do I blow out? Now, we know how fast the air comes in, because with the bellows, we don't wait and say, are you full yet? No, we don't wait. We just keep pumping it because we trust that it comes in and we know how fast it comes in. The same with your body. You squeeze it out, and the moment you release your belly, that change in pressure sucks the air back in. But you just need to learn to trust that that's what happens, and to learn from experience that it really does happen. So, for a moment, let's sit feet flat on the floor and put your butt back in the chair and kind of wiggle so that your shoulders are over your hips. And if you'd like to do this, place your hands on your belly and press gently as you blow out. You're not trying to blow out all the air. It doesn't have to be hard and fast. It's just real gentle. And then when you think you've blown out enough, you relax. And by the time you say the word relax, the air is in and you get right back to blowing out. And then you relax. And when you say that word relax, or a two-syllable word or a one-syllable word, that's all the time it takes to get the air to come back in. Because we know from the bellows example how fast it comes in. So you play around with this. A great way to do this when you get home is when you're lying in bed. I recommend actually you practice this 3 times a day for a few minutes. Lying in bed at night, you're flat. Standing up, gravity is affecting me, but lying in bed, gravity is evened out throughout your whole body. And so it's a little easier to pull your belly down to the bed, down towards the bed. And what I suggest you use your imagination, and one thought is that you think of your belly button as a real button. And when you're lying there in bed, there's a string that goes through the button, goes down through your spine, through the mattress, and under the bed, there's a genie pulling on the string, and your belly goes down. And then the genie gets tired and lets go, and your belly pops up, and then down again, and up. And you play around with, how long do I hold my belly down? I can't tell you. You live in your body. You have to see what it feels like. And you might want to go to the edge and just say, I want to try this until I just have to stop. Or I want to do it fast and see how I feel. And take note of that. You're still doing a little research project here on your own body. So lying in bed, going to sleep, it will help you to relax and get to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, the same thing is going to help you wake up. It's kind of amazing. It's the same breathing, but in the morning it will help you to get energized. And then I suggest one other time during the day, perhaps before a meal, because mealtime is a time we want to be really relaxed so that our neck is relaxed, so that we can swallow effectively and we can eat slowly. And in our fast-paced culture, although Vermont is not as fast-paced as where I lived for 30 years, New Jersey, it's still a time when we want to let go of stuff that we're thinking about and just concentrate on eating. So 3 times a day. It's not something, I'm talking to you in an intellectual way. I'm asking you to do something learn something in a physical way. This is physical education, because you're teaching your body a new idea to actively engage your belly and experience the relaxation that comes with the whole process, and the saving of energy just in the breathing process itself. Okay, trust the universe. Let's talk. So we've talked about vacuum and suction. Let's talk a little bit about anatomy and physiology of breathing. So people say, well, should I breathe through my nose or my mouth? When you're not doing anything, when you're sitting quietly, in and out through your nose is fine, but when you start being physically active, you may not be able to get enough air through your nose alone. So that's where the pursed lips come in, blowing gently through pursed lips. And then you can either close your mouth and let the air come in through your nose, or if you're out walking, leaving your mouth open is fine. It's not going to be wide open, but it's going to be slightly open. And the air will come in. So the air then comes down your airway here in the front. And I'd like you to feel your collarbone. And just below your collarbone, there's a crook in your feel the crook in your collarbone, there's a little, I call it a speed bump, about an inch below your collarbone. That's the top of your breastbone. The reason I mention that is that underneath that is where your airway splits into your right lung and your left lung. This is the significance of this location. These are called conducting airways. They get smaller and smaller as you get down into the lower lobes of your lungs. They are conducting airways. There's no gas exchange. There's no oxygen getting into blood in these conducting airways. It's not until you get mostly down here. There are a few alveoli up here. They're the microscopic sacs through which oxygen passes to get into the bloodstream. So the lung has a big job to do to get the air first down into the sacs that can take the oxygen out and send it on its merry way into the bloodstream. It's an amazing job that we're asking it to do. As a respiratory therapist, I have this bad habit of watching people breathe, and I count how frequently they breathe. And I do it by simply counting 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000. There are very few people I can get to 4 1,000. It's usually 1 1,000, 2 1,000, maybe into 3 1,000. Excuse me. What this means, if I count to 2 1,000 and they've taken another breath, it means they're breathing 30 times a minute. Normal breathing rate is 12 to 20. Even 20 is high normal. 30 is all up here in the conducting airways, which means the oxygen is never really getting down here into the lower lobes. That's why people are sluggish. That's why they have no energy, because they're not getting the oxygen into the blood. So by using your belly, this whole vacuum suction deal, is sucking the air down in without a lot of effort on your part. What else about anatomy and physiology? Any questions at this point? I imagine there must be some questions. I like to take questions as they pop up into your head. How many have heard this kind of thing before?
Components of it.
Components, good. And have you applied any in your life?
Yes.
How do you use it in your life?
Calming, getting more of this, parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah. So, and your name is?
Joni.
Joni mentioned parasympathetic nervous system. So breathing is connected to the autonomic nervous system, the overriding name for the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems, which is that balancing act that our nervous system does for us. It's not something that, well, we think we can't control it, but we can manage it through our breathing. So when you're on the highway and somebody cuts you off and you go, you just activated the part that gets you all riled up. Which doesn't help a lot because it doesn't help. We know this. So how do you override that? And I do the same thing. Even though I know better, I catch myself doing it. I just immediately blow on my pinwheel and just let it go. And so the pinwheel blowing gets you settled down and rebalanced, and yeah.
So I have a question, and maybe you're going to get to this on point number 3, but I like to hike.
Say that again?
I like to hike.
Yes.
And I have certainly gotten pretty winded, depending on where I'm hiking.
Sure.
So if I start to find myself getting winded, do I just really concentrate more on that out breath to try and bring that so that I'm not so winded by the time I get to the top?
Good question. So the question is, what do I do when I'm hiking and I get winded? What do I do? Here's the deal about the breathe-out dynamic system. It's something we can talk about and you know about, but when you want to use it, you have to have it in your muscles. So what I suggest you do is, whenever you're hiking, always be using the breathe-out dynamic system. And there's a way of counting steps so that the steeper you go, you're breathing, a breathing cycle of out-breath and in-breath changes. So when you're walking on the flats, you might be breathing out for, let's say, 7 steps and 2 steps for the in-breath. That's not going to work when you get up high on a mountain. When I'm hiking and I'm up at the top, I'm taking 2 steps on my out-breath and 1 for the in-breath. And that pace allows me to just keep plugging away. Of course, you have to slow down as well, but it's like gearing a bike. If you start gearing the bike in the middle of the hill, you're done. You got to anticipate it and do it in advance of when you really need it. Learning this, if you want to use this, learning it in your muscles is essential. When I first learned it, it took me a couple of weeks. I actually took a week-long class with Ian Jackson at Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. And about 2 weeks after that, I was out walking in my neighborhood, and I realized that I couldn't wait to get to the out-breath. Enough of the in-breath. Let me get to the out-breath. And I realized, wow, my body finally gets it. So it takes time. You're changing muscle habits. Muscles are slow learners. They're not stupid, but they require practice and respect. And when you come out at the other end of all this practice, you will just have this new respect for your body and what it can do, and it will do things that you never thought it could do because of your focus on the out-breath. Thank you for the question, Margot. Bryce?
How about when you're in the hospital and you're a patient, they give you an incentive spirometry, which measures your in-breath.
Well, let me ask you a question about incentive spirometers, because they've been my pet peeve for a long time. How many of us have used an incentive spirometer? So we know what we're talking about. It's a little plastic gizmo, costs 30, 40, 50 bucks in the hospital. Some of them ask you to suck in a breath. Some of them these days, I think maybe more than not, you blow into them. Now, when I was in respiratory school, it was sucking up on it. And I thought, I knew why the patients weren't using them. And I thought it was because it hurts like hell when you have a chest wound and you're asked to suck up. It hurts like hell. Who is going to do this therapy if it hurts? You get the same benefit by squeezing your belly and blowing out, and there's no detrimental effect to your chest. You're helping to relax yourself because the out-breath activates the part of your autonomic nervous system that relaxes you. So as long as you blow into it, it's fine. And measuring your output, I don't think that's so, well, there are many ways to measure output. I measure output by the hills that I can walk up. That's my pulmonary function test. And I still come out at 100% for my age group, if not a little bit better than that. Because when I was a respiratory therapist, I had access to those machines and I could just check it out. And it was a very interesting study to see my progression. But it was, and 100% of your, it just means that for my age, I'm at 100%. It doesn't mean that I breathe the same as someone who's 55 who gets 100%. They have a different lung volume. But anyway, physical activity is a great way for you to monitor what you're able to do, if that's important to you. Let's talk about the diaphragm for a minute. The diaphragm is the most important muscle of respiration. It's right under your ribs in the front. It's wherever your ribs are. So the ribs are high in the front, low in the back, and it's dome-shaped. So it's not flat. In its relaxed position, it's like this. In fact, while I was writing the book, I was looking at my hand one day. I thought, you know what? This is domed. I thought, this is the way the diaphragm looks when it's relaxed. And as I mentioned before, in respiratory school, I had trouble understanding the dynamics of the diaphragm because of my focus on the out-breath, totally opposite of what the textbooks were writing. And I thought, yeah, when my hand opens up, it flattens out. And that's what happens to the diaphragm. It flattens out also. So here's where your diaphragm is. So I squeeze my belly, the guts press up against my diaphragm, and it gets domed. It's in a relaxed position, and it's squeezing the air out of my lungs. When I relax my belly, I make room in my belly for my diaphragm to descend. It only has to go down about an inch. And it spreads out and flattens out. And it just keeps doing that. So the major work of the lungs is to get rid of carbon dioxide, because that's what keeps us tired and sleepy. When we're breathing up here, we're not getting rid of carbon dioxide. And also, of course, oxygen's not getting into our blood very efficiently. So you compress your guts, your diaphragm gets domed, it's in a relaxed position, pushing air out. This is its most important work, and yet the diaphragm is relaxed. This muscle is relaxed. That's huge savings of energy for you. And when you let your belly out, your diaphragm now has room. It doesn't have to work, really. All it has to do is it has room to drop down. It drops down, and it spreads out. And that pulls the lungs down just enough to create this change in pressure that Bryce was talking about. And this is totally the reverse of focusing on your in-breath. So this is how you save energy, by the effective functioning of your diaphragm. Now, people who have chronic obstructive lung disease have a flattened diaphragm. Smoking will damage your lung tissue. The lung tissue gets big, and it presses, and it's full of air that cannot get out. And it presses down on the diaphragm, and the diaphragm flattens out. So if the natural position of your diaphragm is flat, you're going to benefit from using your belly to help it get domed. Now, it's not going to cure it, but it's going to be an aid in making your diaphragm more functional. Okay, any questions about anatomy and physiology that maybe you're curious about?
I would think singing or playing wind instruments would be, I mean, from my experience of that, you have to use your diaphragm for support. And of course, you're breathing out. You take an in-breath and you're a lot of breathing out. So I would think that would be a beneficial activity.
Absolutely, you bet. Wind instruments are right there with the proper way to breathe. Yeah, very good. Okay, I think we're on to number 3. Number 1, I mean, number 1. Okay, I need someone to help me demonstrate this. The out-breath makes you strong. So let me explain the demonstration. So it's about kinesiology, about muscle testing. I will ask you to put your arm a little above shoulder height, and then I'm going to press down on your wrist and ask you to resist. And we're going to do it 3 times, and I will give you instructions as we go along. Who'd like to volunteer? You want to come up? Sure. Great. Hi, and you are?
My name is Hallie.
Hi, Hallie. Thanks for being a volunteer. Okay, so is this a good arm to use? Okay. So a little above shoulder height, and don't let me press your arm down. Resist, 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 resist. What are you doing with your breath?
I was holding it.
Exactly. This is what 100% of the people do when they come up to do this. It's perfectly normal. Perfectly normal, because that's what we do in this culture. You know, we're lifting something heavy, we go, right? And yeah, we hold our breath. Why is it not a good idea? I bet you know why.
Well, the stuff you want to get out, the carbon dioxide or whatever, is sitting in there, and you're not.
Nothing's moving, right? Because when you're tense, it's like bending a garden hose in half and expecting the water to flow, or even just squeezing it. You increase the pressure and there's no flow. So you increase blood pressure when you hold your breath. And the oxygen isn't getting to the muscles to help you do your job, right? Okay, same thing. This time I want you to suck in a nice, big, long in-breath. Ready? No, see, okay, you caught yourself. I want you to go like this.
I was breathing as you were talking. And so
okay, so
shall we try it? All right.
a night, yeah, up a little above shoulder height. Okay, now blow it out. Now suck it in. Oh, see, you caught yourself and you started holding your breath again. See if you can just focus on sucking in. Close your eyes, don't even look at me. Ready? Okay, now I want you to blow out long and slow and resist. Blow out through pursed lips, yeah? Strength met strength. Excellent, excellent. Out breath makes you strong. So keep this in mind when you're doing difficult things. You can do it. Just need to know how to use your body effectively. Really important. See how we're doing on time? We have time. Let's see. Let me share some stuff about the book.
They encourage that in exercise too, is to breathe out when you're exerting yourself.
Yes, exhale on exertion. That's one of my mantras. It's very important. Whatever you perceive to be exertion. For instance, does anybody here have difficulty going upstairs? Okay, So one of the things in the book, I don't know, halfway through here, it's about how to use the breathe out dynamic system in daily life. One of them is how to use it with walking, and a great way to start learning how to coordinate breathing with walking is on stairs. So it's about counting how many steps do I take on my out breath and how many for my in breath. And what I recommend is you limit the in breath steps to 2, because we know how fast the air comes in, right? If you wait much more than 2, your body's going to do a quick little unconscious breath. We are trying to override the unconscious breathing system. It doesn't work. We need to bring breathing into our consciousness at least part of the day. You know, when you take your half-hour walk, or you're exercising, or you're driving to work, is a perfect time to focus on this. But you need to learn it. So 2 steps when you're walking for the in-breath. The out-breath, and I mean steps, I mean stairs. Okay, you're doing stairs now. See how many you can do. Maybe you can do 4 or 5 on one out-breath. Now, if you have trouble and you really can't do stairs on the in-breath, then just pause. Let the air come in, comes in quick, and then get right back to blowing out. 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, whatever number of steps works for you. I can't tell you what the number is. You get to figure that out for yourself. What's really nice about this is when you read some exercise books, they tell you how to breathe. Breathe on the up, or breathe on this or that or the other thing. And it's like you have to have the book right there to be reading it as you do the exercise, because it's hard to remember what the focus is. The focus is on the difficult part. That's where you want to emphasize the out-breath, whatever is difficult. The easy part, or if there's no easy part really, then a small period of time is for the in-breath, and you get right back to blowing out. That's what we demonstrated, the strength you get from the out-breath. Don't spend much time on the in-breath. It's a waste of time and effort. Yes?
Is it better to practice your out-breath through your nose or through your mouth, or does it matter?
Thanks for the question about do I use my mouth or my nose for the out-breath. It does matter, I believe, because when you're doing something, maybe not when you're sitting particularly, but if you're doing something that includes movement, you cannot get enough air in or enough air out just through your nose. Now, I have played around with it. I had this kid who had asthma, and he heard about this pursed lip business, and he said, "Can you purse your nose?" And I thought, I've never thought of that. I'm going to try it. So that's what I said to him. Try it and see if it works. So that's what I suggest to you, is you see if it works. Now, because I've had people tell me that they are able to keep their mouth closed when they're running, for instance, and get all the air they need out through their nose and in through their nose. I personally have not been able to do that yet. Let me just say that. Not been able to do it yet. And I've found no detrimental effect in doing this for 30 years with, let's say, change in my palate. For instance, if you are a mouth breather at night when you sleep, we sleep 1/3 of our life. So if 1/3 of your life your mouth is open, air pressure will move your soft palate, that's the roof of your mouth, up into your nasal cavity, and your nasal cavity will get squeezed, and you'll feel it as sinusitis or something or other. So keeping your mouth closed during sleep is very important. I addressed that a little bit in here, but really there are many, many, many reasons why your mouth might be open. It's not really something that I want to cover here, but it is of importance when you're active to feel comfortable with the out-breath through pursed lips. And pursed lips are gentle. They're a whistling position, or you can smile and do it. It's a restriction of the flow of air. so that your airway will stay open. If you go, ha, it's like that's all I can get out, but I can blow out a lot of air through pursed lips. And that's the whole point, is to get rid of as much of the old air as is comfortable. And the comfort part is your decision. So try it both ways and see what works. But it doesn't, when you're walking through your neighborhood, nobody needs to know you're pursing your lips. Or they could if you want, that's fine too. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yes?
But by having a long exhale, your lungs are filling up with that air that went out. So you're actually taking a deep breath without even knowing it, right?
Whatever you blow out comes back in automatically. If you blow out a little bit will come back in. If you blow out a lot will come back in. Yeah. Whatever you blow out comes back in. So I encourage you to play around with your breath. Get to know your body. See how it works. See how differently you might feel. This book is available at the library here. It is also, and it's in paper. It's in iTunes Audible. It's in ebook format. In fact, I give away free ebooks because I want this information out in the world. And it's also at the Library of Congress in the National Library Service. It's in Braille and in audio at the National Library Service. And in the book, there are many, several people I know through an organization called Ski for Light. It's got sighted skiers guiding blind skiers, cross-country skiers, and they give their stories in here. It's really pretty amazing. And I do have books for sale. They are $17. That includes tax. I have a mailing list here. I give workshops once or twice a year. If you'd like to be on the mailing list, be happy to have you sign it. And I do a newsletter occasionally. And I love stories. I was in Londonderry. That was the first talk I gave in July last year. And a couple of days later, I got an email from a fellow who was in the class, and he told me that about, see, that was election day, and there was a primary here in Vermont, I believe, and he went to the primary, and he was coming home. He had Crocs on, and his Crocs had holes in the front, and a stick got stuck in his Croc, and he tripped and fell. And he told me that he would not have been able to get up if he didn't know the breathe-out dynamic system. And he had just learned it. So it might save you in a pinch, too. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome, my
Wonderful.
pleasure.
And so she has books for sale, and there will be one available for checking out. Any questions or anything? More questions?
Do you have any recommendations for how people can stretch their ribs and their diaphragm? Because we work with, there's a lot of different mobilities in people's bodies.
Well, interesting that you asked that, because when I was writing the book, actually, I was very ticklish in my ribs. And I thought, this is not normal. A loved one shouldn't put their hands around you, and you shouldn't be jumping. I thought, maybe I'm breathing so efficiently that I'm not really stretching my lungs, my rib cage very much, Because muscles that aren't used get twitchy. You see people who jiggle their leg like this? It's nervous energy asking to be released. So I thought, I'm going to do this little game. It's in the book. It's called Be a Balloon. And it's something you want to do seated or standing in place. And it's just to imagine your torso is a pear-shaped balloon, and you actually put effort on the in-breath, and you suck up this huge breath up to here, and then you squeeze it out, and you feel your rib cage expand. And I did that for a while. And you try to keep your shoulders in place. You don't want to be lifting your shoulders, because actually your lungs are not attached to your shoulders. They're attached to your diaphragm. So when you do this to take a deep breath, it's a ton of wasted effort, because you're not expanding your lungs at all. You're just lifting your shoulders. So I did this for a short period of time, maybe a few months. I'm not ticklish anymore. So I think it's just they need to be exercise. Thank you for the question. And what's your professional life about? Sounds like it's a
Integrative nurse practitioner health. Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How does this concept relate to like prana or Buddhist or meditative breathing that you do?
Well, it's all meditative. The question was, how does it relate to Buddhist and all the other breathing traditions? It takes this little piece of yoga that says you get strength from your out-breath. Now, I, in my younger days, had difficulty sitting and meditating. When I learned this, I used it all the time for walking, and my walking became moving meditation, and I finally felt like, oh, I can do this thing called meditation. I don't have to be sitting to do it, because meditation is about a focus on this moment. No other moment matters. And when you're walking, you want to be totally comfortable in your body. And when you're coordinating breathing with walking and counting steps, and you're just totally here with your body, it's meditative. Thank you very much for coming.